Today on the Andrew Cooperrider show, WKYT took a second to interview me regarding a post I'd made last Thursday. I touched on the post and obviously some of the content in it over the last couple of days, but after I recorded my show Friday is when I did the interview for that newscast. We'll take a look at that newscast, see what was said, and dispel some of the talking points put within. Governor Beshear coming under fire due to his handling of mental health issues here in Kentucky, with the DOJ coming out after an investigation telling Beshear, well, you are institutionalizing people, hospitalizing people for mental health reasons a little too often, a little too frequently, taking away people's rights when they didn't need to be. We'll go into that report. Then if we have time, we'll go ahead and dig into a few other stories about things kind of going on here in Kentucky, especially up in Louisville, regarding a shooting at Walmart. Maybe we'll dig into a story regarding some gift card scams. But if we're not able to dig into those stories today and you're listening to this show, that means you need to tune in tomorrow. Now, this is the video format of the show. It goes out on all well, not all, but it goes out on Facebook and Twitter, but it also goes out on the TV as well. So if you're viewing this and you say, hey, I like what I'm listening to, I want to listen to the Andrew Cooperrider show each and every day, you can head over to, well, each and every day, Monday through Friday. You can head over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com, and go ahead and hit the Listen Now tab to see all the different places where you can tune into the Andrew Cooperrider show. But if you don't like what you're listening to, and you're still listening to the show, I have to ask you, why? Do you not have better things to do than to watch about an hour-long show about politics, viewpoints you don't even agree with? If you don't enjoy what you're listening to, don't you have better things to do with your life, to do things that maybe you do enjoy? I don't know. Just a thought process for you. I just think the world would be a little bit better off if people didn't hate listen to everything, but listen to things because they're genuinely interested to stay informed. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So those of you who follow me on social media know on Thursday I called out an event that was held at BCTC, that's Bluegrass Community and Technical College. That's a part of the Kentucky Community and Technical College system. It's very important to notate that because we'll be talking about where they get their funding and everything else here in a second. What I called out there is they were having a back to school LGBTQ bash or what have you. And there was a drag performer performing out in the open where people could see what was going on. And not only do we know that there were individuals under 18 there, I did provide a photo of it on my social media. Obviously, the photo was taken kind of far away. This person was passing by and said, wow, I'm absolutely disgusted by this, and wanted to alert people like myself in order to do something about it, in order to bring attention to it so maybe our tax dollars stop getting spent on this kind of thing. And due to the nature of how I got the photo, is how we know that there's people under 18 that were present at the event. In fact, there's several comments on other posts that have talked about this BCTC Thursday drag show event that mentioned they saw children in strollers walking around the event, children in strollers, so clearly underage. We do have a few other commenters that commented saying their children, high school age, under the age of 18, were on campus because they attend and take classes there, that also saw this event that was going on. So it is, factually speaking, we have people under 18 doing the event, but also, importantly as well, that goes into this specific event, is the fact that it is taxpayer funded. Taxpayer dollars were definitely used some way, some shape or form to put on the event. That is something that we'll dig into here after the news broadcast. But I think that's important to bring up because the entire reason, why I even bothered to bring it up, honestly, if they're having a drag show in a bar or a strip club in an age-controlled place where we knew that we had one, consenting adults, and two, people who can consent legally, people above the age of 18, well, I wouldn't have even mentioned it. I wouldn't even brought it up. While I may find drag shows particularly to be a strange thing that some people enjoy watching, it's not something that I feel I want my government to do anything to stop, as long as everybody involved is consenting adults. But when you do ask for my opinion, when you're asking for me to get involved, when you're asking for me to call on my government to do something, is when you're doing one of two things. You're either, one, not doing something without consenting adults or children involved, where you're exposing yourself or doing something sexual in nature that is being exposed to non-consenting adults and children, or two, when you're using my money to do it. The minute you use taxpayer funds to put on this type of behavior, this type of event, you're inviting in my opinion. You're inviting me to ask my legislators to do something to stop this kind of behavior from going on. If you don't want my opinion on what you're doing, then don't do it, where one, people who didn't consent or can't consent to seeing it are seeing it, and then two, don't use my money to do it. In fact, nobody had any problems with drag in our modern society when it fell into one of those, as long as you stay away from those two categories. Nobody did. When drag shows were going on at bars and going on at strip clubs, nobody said anything about it at all. It was one of those things where, well, if we leave well enough alone, we'll leave it well enough alone. And so, having been sent this photo, I posted on social media about how this event was going on, that there was minors present at this event, and it was, and I said, your tax dollars hard at work. And obviously, people on the left, I guess you'd call it politically, but I wouldn't even necessarily attach it, generally speaking, to the left. I'd like to get rid of left or right politics in this discussion because, honestly speaking, there are people who are Democrats that are on the left. There are people who are gay, that are bisexual, that fall into one of those different, sexual minorities other than probably trans, that look at things like children at drag shows, and they also find issue with it. They recognize that drag shows are sexual in nature. So, and while otherwise they may be to the left and politically vote left, even they recognize that this is not something children should be at. And it's interesting too, because we're often told that, drag shows are just, artistic performances. But for some reason, it's tied into this LGBTQ push. And honestly, it's tied into the T side of things when it doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with that. We're talking about two different things here. To me, they're detached issues. One has nothing to do with the other. I understand that they may lump them together, but when we're talking about children being exposed to sexual material, when we're talking about non-consenting adults being exposed to sexual material, it doesn't matter what you do behind closed doors. We can all agree that this is a problem. And so I brought this out, and obviously those that defend this kind of behavior manage to try to find some way to argue about it. And the argument's a little bit ridiculous, but this quote-unquote controversy that was stirred up by the ones that defend this kind of behavior, putting it out there and deciding they wanted to turn it into more than just me making a post, as I have done before, about a waste of taxpayer funds. Anybody who listens to the show knows I spend way more time, and what I'm very passionate about isn't actually as much to do with this kind of LGBTQ or this drag show madness that we have going on. I spend more time, and what my show spends most of its time digging into is how our tax dollars are being spent. That's what I'm passionate about. And that's the only reason, really speaking, why I talk about these things, or tax dollars, what they're being spent on. So rather than debating that side of things, I decided to dig into and stir up the controversy, which led to WKYT reaching out to me. So we'll play that interview, that story from them, and dig into a few points they made after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As I was saying before the break, the left got hopping mad at, well, we won't call it the left. We'll call it the trans mob, we'll say. It doesn't mean they're necessarily trans themselves, but they believe in the idea that men and women can change genders and yada, 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 all that craziness. Well, they decided to make a big deal about a post that was made, which flared up a TV here locally in Lexington, WKYT, to go ahead and cover the story. And they reached out to me to do an interview. It was after my Friday show, so I wasn't able to reference this then. And then it aired that evening. I want to play for you the interview, what they did show you, and kind of dig into a few of the points, because they did ask me about some of these things, but they did not air my responses. So I think it's worth noting what they kind of missed on. But go ahead and take a listen here to the interview.
Jessica Umbro talked with Andrew Cooperrider about his post, as well as the performer he made it about.
It was jarring. I'm still kind of reeling from it. You know, I am just a normal person working a normal job throughout the work week.
Drag entertainer Uma Jules says she wore an outfit inspired by pop artist Dua Lipa to a Pride event held at BCTC, an outfit conservative radio host Andrew Cooperrider referred to as lingerie.
To me, that's just silly to even think about. I had on more clothes probably than anybody else there.
But Cooperrider stands by his statement that the outfit is sexual in nature.
Whether it's Dua Lipa wearing it or a drag performer wearing it, it doesn't matter. It clearly is meant to create the idea of showing way more skin than just a simple outfit would.
This is not the first time Cooperrider has stirred debate. In 2020, he refused to close his coffee shop during COVID lockdown measures by Governor Andy Beshear.
The argument that this is somehow not sexual, I find to be gaslighting at best, dishonest at worst.
I talked with a spokesperson for BCTC earlier, and they were able to send me a statement from the college's president and CEO. He says that this is not the first time that this event has been put on, but he does deny that it was paid for by taxpayers.
In a statement to WKYT, BCTC president and CEO Dr. Greg Feeney said this is the fourth year that the college has held the event, saying in part, quote, "I am listening to many concerns all the way around. Our ultimate goal is to support students." He then addressed one part of Cooperrider's post, saying no taxpayer dollars were used to fund the event.
I think the crux of the argument is about, is drag sexual or not?
If drag is not your thing, then you don't have to attend the event.
In Lexington, Jessica Umbro, WKYT.
So there was a lot of things obviously said in that interview that I think is worth digging into. I think one of the most interesting claims made was towards the beginning when the drag performer, who I believe is a guy. So it was a weird kind of situation there with the news reporter, because that definitely at the beginning looked like a guy. Typically drag performers are guys who dress as girls too as well. I know that's not all of them apparently, but typically that's the case. So it was a guy. And he presents as a guy. But then the news reporter used female pronouns. And, you know, like I said, I was told that drag is an art form, supposedly, and it's just an art performance. That has nothing to do with any kind of political speech or anything like that. It's an art performance, but it's also free speech, but it's also not. It's very confusing, obviously, what they change up the definition of it. But he said he's just a normal person. I'm just a normal person. You know, I'm so surprised that Andrew Cooperrider on Facebook would post something about me performing in the middle of the day on a public road sidewalk on a public campus owned by the state, and would be so shocked that somebody would post about me performing. Obviously, this isn't shocking. This individual performs for that reason. He isn't normal by just a simple definition of it. I mean, to define normal, it means conforming to a standard, usual, typical, or expected. The example that they give here when you Google the definition of normal is it's quite normal for puppies to bolt their food, meaning that the behavior is one that is standard. That's a normal thing to do. Well, definitionally speaking, I'm assuming a gay man who dresses in drag and then performs in front of people makes you not normal. That's quite the opposite. In fact, if you were normal, if you were like everything else, doing what everybody else does, you wouldn't be paid to hop up on a stage and cross-dress. So definitionally speaking, you're not a normal person, and you should never be shocked that something you've done in public as a performance that you want people to view and see and have opinions on, because obviously you know what you're doing, it has a political charge to it. You're not doing it behind closed doors where only people who've consented to view that show happen to come across it, and it's only adults that have consented to go ahead and view the show that come across it. No, you're doing it for the attention, so don't be shocked when you get attention. That'd be like me making posts on social media followed by thousands of people, me making podcast episodes and TV shows and radio shows that are listened to by thousands of people, and then being shocked that something I said somehow made it into the media mainstream. Those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis know things I say all the time make it into the media mainstream. They don't necessarily credit me with it, but those of you who listen know that you'll hear me talk about an issue here on the show, that then within a few days to maybe even sometimes a week later, you'll suddenly hear the mainstream media reporting on it, because a lot of the mainstream media people, local media people, actually do listen to my show, pay attention to my social media, because it gives them leads to where to go find things for them to write about. So it shouldn't be shocking to anybody, least of all him. But the other claim made is that, children were not present. Now, as I've said before, this is just factually false. We know children were present based on the nature of how we got the photo. Once again, we know there was children there. We know based upon the testimony we've seen on Facebook comments as well from individuals saying that they have kids that attend that school that are under 18 that saw this go down, that saw this performance. We know children who legally can't consent to viewing it were there. We also know that adults who did not consent to viewing the sexual content were also there. Once again, whatever you do behind closed doors, that's not taxpayer funded with consenting adults. I don't want my government to do anything about. I don't care. What you do out in the open, you're now inviting in those opinions. So the claim that kids weren't there, that's ridiculous. But there was another claim made on the show, on the interview, that I find almost as incredible as the claim that the drag performer is just a normal person. And that is that somehow BCTC says that taxpayer funds were not used to put on the event. Now, anybody who knows even a little bit of critical thinking skills would immediately hear that statement and go, huh? No, that is because BCTC is literally a state-owned, state-run, they wouldn't exist without your tax dollars. In fact, according to KCTC's budget, over 60% of their budget comes from tax dollars, at least 60%. In fact, tuition, according to their budget, only covers 24% of their operating expenses, of their revenues. Without you, the taxpayer, footing the bill, BCTC would not exist. The idea that anything could happen at BCTC and it not somehow, some way being taxpayer funded is absolutely ridiculous. But what makes that claim even more incredible is when we look at the flyer for the event, we see here on the flyer that it was organized by something called the LGBTQ services. And when you check out the LGBTQ services, do some research on it, what you'll find out is appears to be an actual department, a DEI department of BCTC. That the LGBTQ services has a person who's the head of it that is paid $48,000 a year. Now, I was able to find the fact of how much he was paid because I researched his salary off of the Kentucky State Employee Salary website. It's that easy, that available, because he's a state employee. So you have it says, according to the flyer, it was organized by a BCTC, appears to be department, not a club, a department that has active office hours, that's about 30 hours a week, that's headed up by a guy that's being paid almost $50,000 a year by taxpayers, that uses a taxpayer-funded email to communicate about it. And then that leads to the other questions of, oh no, this wasn't taxpayer-funded, it was all the private student organizations, private organizations put it on. Did they pay you a rental fee? Who paid for the tent? Who paid for the chairs that the event took place with? It was done on a stage. Who paid for the stage? Who paid for the tent that was covering it? Who paid for the chairs everybody was sitting in? Who paid for the cleanup? Who paid for the ground that the performance is taking place on? Did they rent it? Can anybody rent it? Can any nonprofit rent it? Can you and I rent that space for the same price point? I didn't find anywhere where it had rates and advertisements that you could go ahead and have an event there. And money is fungible. There is no way, shape, or form you can have an event that literally says it's organized by one of the school's departments without taxpayer funds being used for it. They think you're stupid, but they're trying to obfuscate away from the real argument that we need to have here. And this is the real argument. Is drag sexual or not? That's the real conversation, but that's not the argument they want to have because they know that's an argument they're going to lose. Because they haven't convinced enough of the public yet to literally be stupid enough, to bury their heads in the sand enough to somehow agree that, yes, drag is not sexual, I swear. You know, even though for literally all of time it's existed, other than recently, it was done in strip clubs and bars. We're supposed to believe there's no sexual connotations to it at all. Well, coming up after this, we'll talk about Andy Beshear, mental health, dinged by the DOJ. We'll go over that after this short break. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So I want you to take a look. This is a news report from 2022 from Fox 56. And it's about mental health in Kentucky, some bills being passed. And it has to do with a new DOJ report that just came out dinging Beshear, dinging Kentucky, for wrongfully committing individuals to essentially mental health hospitals where, like, you know, their rights are taken away and they can't leave. Doing so too often and overreaching. But I want to play, here's a news report from 2022. Take a listen to this.
Governor Andy Beshear has signed 2 new bills that address mental health concerns in the state.
Tyler Melito joins us now in studio with the details. Tyler.
Marvin and Amani, good evening. House Bill 127 expands access to assisted outpatient treatment, allowing the courts to order outpatient care for people with severe mental illness. And House Bill 562 allows first responders to take up to 48 hours of leave after being involved in a critical accident without repercussions. If there is one overarching theme of today's bill signing, it would be letting people who suffer from mental health issues know that they are supported.
Providing care to individuals with severe mental illness is crucial to the health and success of the Commonwealth, but isn't it also living out our faith and values and helping people when they truly need it and providing that best path towards getting well?
So by doing this, we are becoming a much more compassionate state. This is a win for Kentucky and for our seriously mentally ill population.
Comes into reality, and I'm looking forward to making sure that we expand this statewide to get the funding in there so we can help more people out. This only affects less than 2% of the people, but those 2% are of our loved ones, and we need to support them as much as possible.
The law duly recognizes the importance of protecting the mental health of our first responders while strengthening our support for those who have dedicated their lives to keeping us and our communities safe.
The firefighter is more likely to die from suicide.
The governor mentioned there earlier today that there are already plans to add other mental health laws in the coming years. We will have more details about both bills on our website, fox56news.com. Reporting in studio, I'm Tyler Melito, Fox.
So what are the 2 bills he's signing there that deal with mental health? Well, specifically dealing with this DOJ report, we're going to look at House Bill 127 from 2022. And here's a summary of the bill found off of LRC, Legislative Research Commission's website. And the bill would amend KRS 202A.0811 to clarify that the respondent be evaluated by a mental health professional and not examined. Specify where and by when a qualified mental health professional's findings shall be certified, and specify when a date for a hearing shall be set. Amend KRS 202A.0815 to expand the class of individuals who can have access to assisted outpatient treatment by modifying the criteria requirements for court-ordered assisted outpatient treatment. This is incredibly important that we talk about here. Okay? Because what's going on is we're changing our policy to allow, in 2022, to allow more people who would normally be legally committed to having to be in psychiatric wards and psychiatric hospitals to now receive court-ordered outpatient services instead of being committed and losing a lot of their freedoms. So the other bill that he signed dealt with peace officers, mental health of peace officers. So not as important to what we're talking, important piece of legislation, but not as important to what we're dealing with here at this DOJ report. So this tells us that the legislature gave him more tools to be able to not commit people to hospitals, something that Beshear said he applauded. But that didn't stop, however, the DOJ from finding that the Beshear administration has been unnecessarily committing people to mental health hospitals. This is from the DOJ report. They say people with serious mental illness in Louisville are caught in an unacceptable cycle of repeated psychiatric hospitalizations because they cannot access community-based care. That's what the Assistant Attorney General Christian said in a press release Tuesday. Already this costs more money. This caused 3 issues. First, it costs more money to the taxpayer because committing somebody to a hospital bed, to a psychiatric ward, is going to cost way more than outpatient treatments would. 2, this will cause a shortage of beds in psychiatric hospitals. A shortage that we're feeling, by the way, to the point where we're spending tens of millions of dollars right now building more psychiatric wards on the taxpayers' dime, of course, here in Kentucky. In fact, there's one being built right now in Lexington. But third and most important, you're taking away people's rights. I mean, I think all of us would be lying if we didn't say that one of our greatest fears would be to be committed to a mental health hospital and not need to be committed. And have to, argue with the wind that you shouldn't be committed? Because, of course, anything you say, they're like, oh, he's just crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's crazy. Don't listen to him. He's not fine. I think anybody's afraid of that. There's been a lot of movies where that's been the storyline. Literally, the subject of horror and suspense and thriller movies have been about people being illegally confined to mental health hospitals, and that's what Beshear has been doing. But he also really hasn't done a very good job addressing this at all. He hasn't brought up a need for more outpatient services. The DOJ comes along and points this out, but the legislature gave him more tools. If he wants to hand this off and blame this on somebody else, he's going to have a hard problem. I mean, in fact, let's listen to his State of the State address. He did mention mental health last year in it. Let's take a listen to that.
Tonight, let's commit to moving forward together on our people's mental and physical health. To do that, we must fully fund Medicaid, including expanded Medicaid, to make sure we're continuing to care for more than 1.5 million of our Kentucky neighbors. We should further fund the expansion of the Michelle P. and Supports for Community Living waiver programs. They help our most vulnerable citizens. Because right now, we are seeing more opportunity for us, more opportunity for our people than at any time in my life. That means we need all of our people to be healthy enough to be a part of this future and the prosperity it'll bring. So let's continue to expand access to quality health care for all of our people.
Seems like a whole lot of talk and no action. In fact, I searched for any press releases I could find about Beshear demanding he needs more money from the legislature because they have to confine people. He needs more access to programs. He needs more of that. And I couldn't particularly find one. In fact, I searched his official Twitter account to see if anywhere he brought this up. He did call out the legislature to fund more mental health care when he's doing his budget preparations in 2023. But it looks like that the legislature delivered, because I wasn't able to find any complaints that he made about that particular line of funding within our budgets. I searched his Twitter. I couldn't find any. Maybe you can. It'd be wrong of me to say factually he never said he needs more money and more programs and laws passed to help with mental health, specifically outpatient versus inpatient commitments being committed to it by law, by the legal system. I don't see that anywhere. And so we're not, and in fact, when I was looking, I did find a tweet from 2023 about, funny, Kentucky being awarded the #1 spot for adult mental health care, which I don't know if they're grading on a curve, if they're like, we already set the bar lower because it's Beshear's Kentucky, and so we just expect him to not be very good at this. Because last I checked, you probably shouldn't be winning an award ranked the best for adult mental health care when at the same time, less than a year later, the DOJ is coming in and saying you're violating civil rights. because your mental health care is you're committing people too often to mental health hospitals. Maybe by being the best mental health care for adults, they're like, you make them take it whether they need it or not. You're like, I will shove this mental health care down your throat. Maybe that's how they're ranking it. Maybe that's why they won. I don't know. But no, instead of doing hard work, he tried to say he was being celebrated for how amazing he is, while at the same time, we now have the DOJ saying he was violating civil rights. Coming up after this, we're going to talk about Louisville Metro Police Department. We've got 2 stories coming out of them that is worth talking about. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So Louisville Metro Police Department, they had a negative, I will say, happened to them over this past week or so. But they've had an interesting occurrence, obviously, with a shooting that occurred at Kroger, with the interim chief saying something that I think hasn't gotten enough attention. But let's dig down into this first story here that is an issue. It does make them obviously look bad. A Louisville Metro Police Department, from WLKY. A Louisville Metro Police Department officer has been arrested, accused of pocketing money from a person he arrested. LMPD says Javar Downs, I'm going to say it's Javar Downs. I think it's Javar. I don't think it's Havar. I think it's Javar Downs, who works for the traffic unit, was taken into custody on Friday. They said a person was arrested on Wednesday, and the next day filed a complaint with police saying around $4,000 of their $10,000 had been taken. LMPD Integrity Unit opened up an investigation early Friday morning, arrested Downs, and charged him with theft by unlawful taking over $1,000 and official misconduct. Now, what's interesting about Javar Downs is that Javar Downs was also involved in the Scotty Scheffler arrest. He's one of the 4 officers that were involved in the Scotty Scheffler arrest, and he was also one of the 4 officers who reportedly had not turned on his body camera or wasn't wearing one at the time of the Scotty Scheffler arrest. Remember, there was the big thing about the Scotty Scheffler arrest wasn't just that he was arrested. The world's #1 PGA golfer was arrested in Louisville for literally following the traffic commands of an officer or PGA officials or whoever had told him what to do, and then was promptly grabbed out of his vehicle. But for some reason, the only real footage we could get seemed to be from a camera across the way. The body cam footage was hard to come by because, as it turned out, the officers involved in the arrest either didn't have on body cameras or turn on body cameras, a complete and utter violation of department policy. Well, one of those people reportedly was Javar Downs, which leaves me a question. Is the reason why Scotty Scheffler was arrested was because he didn't give a bribe to Javar Downs? I mean, Javar Downs allegedly stole $4,000 from one guy and still arrested him. I wonder what the cost would be if we went ahead and, if you just wanted not to get arrested at all. How much would you have had to pay him? Maybe that's the reason why Scotty Scheffler got arrested in the first place. But it is troubling when we see this kind of behavior and people not turning on their body cameras. And not only that, but it gives police officers a bad name. I mean, backing the blue means that we appreciate the hard work the officers do in protecting the law, being honest, upstanding individuals. But when you have individuals that have been known not to turn on their body cameras, while at the same time, allegedly not turning on their body cameras and allegedly stealing from the people they're arresting and being caught on camera doing it, it certainly isn't painting a very good picture. And it tells you the exact kind of culture LMPD has been dealing with. We have the slushy gates. We have, the issues with the sexual harassments and pool party gate. Those of you who listen to my show have heard me talk about pool party gate involving a slew of lawsuits being filed left and right. And this type of behavior is obviously being promulgated by those at the top. Not a shocker. I mean, obviously, the former chief, because they have an interim chief now, but the former chief, Jacqueline, she herself was responding to calls without body cameras on, violating department policy. And so it's, quite honestly, it's not surprising that this problem continues, because it is about accountability. Those who are being afraid of being held accountable. You know, in my first story, I talked about the BCTC president somehow claiming tax dollars weren't being used, when clearly that's not true. I have no idea why he would claim that. Obviously, we can file an ORR and prove that's not the case. But anyways, the point is that in the same way that kind of truth and transparency is important to make the taxpayers trust you, it's also important that when you have a policy of turning on your body cameras, you do it when it comes to officers. You do it. Though there is a shining moment that I think really should be getting more attention, but it's not. And I've searched and searched and searched, and I can't find anybody actually following up on this point. But for those of you in Louisville, you certainly have heard of this story regarding one Randall Allen. So reportedly, what had occurred is that there was a incident involving a wreck, a police chase wreck on a carjacking that then the police were trying to catch the two people that did it, which resulted in a wreck. And then they were able to apprehend the driver, but apparently the passenger, who's Randall Allen, allegedly, everything I'm saying here is allegedly, because while it's on camera and everything else, he's been found guilty of it. So we had to say allegedly. But Randall Allen reportedly had gotten out of the vehicle and then ran over to a Walmart. And so he ran inside of there and started just running around the supermarket there. Police were finally able to get Allen outside. Then Allen proceeded to go ahead and jump into a vehicle of a woman who was waiting in the drive-thru for the pharmacy. The police then shot and injured Randall Allen. He's in the hospital as of Friday, as he was sitting next to the driver of the vehicle. He's facing these charges: resisting arrest, unlawful imprisonment, first degree, possession of controlled substance, first degree meth, possession of drug paraphernalia, robbery, possession of a handgun by a convicted felon, wanton endangerment, and fleeing or invading police in the second degree. Now, that's obviously an awful story, and it points to the kind of lawlessness we're seeing on our streets all across Kentucky, but specifically within our big blue-run cities such as Lexington and Louisville. Those of you who listen to the show have heard me go through a litany of individuals. I mean, Louisville's had issues with people who were on anklets that were charged with things like escape, but they were for some reason out on anklets, cutting their anklets and shooting a woman and stealing cars and walking down the middle of the street waving guns around. We've had issues of individuals who really shouldn't be on the street committing a whole lot of crimes. And it turns out that Randall Allen was actually arrested a month ago for possession of a firearm by a felon and was let out on a $1,000 bond. $1,000 bond. Now, during the press conference or whatever, the interim chief had an interesting comment, and he was asked about why was Randall Allen out on the street. Now, I don't remember who asked, which news reporter asked, but it's interesting that he was asked that question, and the interim chief responded with, well, that's a really good question. Pointing to the fact that the courts letting out these obvious criminals onto our streets and with slaps on the wrist or nothing. I mean, we're talking about criminals violating gun laws out onto the streets. We hear Democrats all the time yelling about how we need to do more about guns, take away the guns, gun violence, guns are awful, guns suck. But what we never hear these liberals calling out for is for people like Randall Allen to be dealt with a little more harshly. This individual is already not allowed to have a firearm. He was then arrested for having a firearm when he wasn't supposed to. Promptly let out on a $1,000 bond. And what did he do with his freedom? Well, apparently, reportedly, he used a firearm to try to carjack a woman, which led to him being shot and now in a hospital. So the question remains, why was he allowed out? And honestly, if we had any news worth their salt at all, they would be digging into this story time and time again. Same thing as, the story at the top. I was talking about WKYT spent time on that story with me about what happened there on BCTC's campus. And while I understand they don't have all the time in the world, they have 2-minute blurbs of stories that they do. And while that may be important to you or me, it may not be something they want to wade into, and I can understand that. But something like this, asking, why is it that somebody was out on $1,000 bond? Why is it that these criminals keep getting to run the streets? Who are the judges that are doing this? And has somebody ever asked these judges why? You think that'd be big news? You think that would be important? That's the kind of information we want to hear about why our communities are so unsafe. But no news seems to be really wanting to grab onto that information. Wonder why. Well, y'all, that's what I got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.